My culinary voice is quieter and quieter with every year. I try to say much more with fewer words and fewer ingredients.
In 2022, during an episode of Alex vs. America, viewers were suddenly stunned to see blood spill on national television. It wasn't a staged accident, nor a dramatic climax underscored by music. On Alex vs. America, the mandoline blade sliced straight into Alex Guarnaschelli's hand. The cameras didn't cut. The studio didn't stop. After first aid, she returned to the kitchen and the competition continued as if nothing had happened. What shocked people wasn't the violence, but the calm acceptance of pain, as if endurance were simply a default part of the job. That moment exposed a paradox that has followed her throughout her career. A person television has defined by icy standards, while inside is a structure under constant load. Talent that allows no deviation, discipline that permits no pause, and emotions that must always come after results. There is no spectacular fall to recount, only the fact that falling has never been allowed. That is the price of resilience. Between the ruthless discipline of the kitchen and the unforgiving glare of television lights, between professional authority and personal solitude, between standards that once saved a person and those same standards, when held for too long, begin to grind away from within. This is not a story about culinary glory, but the journey of someone who keeps everything standing by turning herself into the final load-bearing point. Alex Guarnaschelli was born in 1969 and grew up in New York, in an environment where food was not approached as inspiration, but as a chain of responsibilities that had to be controlled. It existed on a work desk among thick manuscripts, pages heavily marked with pencil edits and recipes that had to be read carefully before being allowed to move forward. Alex's mother was a cookbook editor, a job that did not directly produce food, but determined how food was recorded, understood, and passed on. In that space, cooking did not appear as inspiration. It appeared as obligation. A flawed recipe did not cause embarrassment, it caused problems. An imprecise detail did not spark debate. It had to be corrected. There, making mistakes was not accompanied by emotion. It came with consequences. Alex grew up in days like that, where observation mattered more than expression, and caution was treated as a given, not a virtue worth praising. Her childhood was tied to repetitive processes: read, test, revise, then read again. There was no audience, only results and repercussions. That experience did not produce early impulsiveness or daydreaming. It produced a habit, seeing everything as a system that could collapse if one link was taken lightly. Alex's academic path followed that same inertia. She attended Horace Mann School, then graduated from Barnard College in 1991 with a degree in art history. That choice did not lead directly to the kitchen. It led her to a life lived within structure, reading context, recognizing order, and understanding that standards do not appear naturally. They are formed, maintained, and tested over time. After graduating, Alex did not look for a sheltered path. In 1991, she started at the very bottom of the kitchen hierarchy, working for minimum wage at a restaurant in New York. There was no memorable origin story, only the real operational rhythm: clear ranks, constant pressure, and a very concrete sense that every mistake left traces. On the plate, on the work schedule, and in the memory of those standing nearby. In the early 1990s, Alex left the US for France, stepping into kitchens where discipline required no explanation. During a work-study period at a Michelin-starred restaurant, the tension was established from the first sentence. A head chef looked at her as an anomaly before seeing her as a professional, then said bluntly that he did not know what was worse, her being a woman or her being American. Years later, when recalling that experience in a talk at Barnard College, Alex did not frame it as a triumph. She described it simply as a temperature one had to live in if one wanted to stay. She stayed, literally. She worked unpaid as an apprentice for months, within a system where her presence was not counted as labor, but as something to be endured in exchange for learning. 4 years later, she was placed in a sous chef position at another restaurant. But when a woman held authority in the middle of a young French brigade, that authority did not arrive as a given. It arrived through quiet resistance in even the smallest details. Those years did not produce victories worth recounting. They produced a working rhythm, silence, observation, and acceptance of scrutiny. Alex saw how head chefs managed not only food, but people, sometimes fairly, sometimes harshly, but rarely ambiguously. Her professional voice was shaped there, direct, sparing with explanations, and not accustomed to seeking consensus. Alex did not carry a story of triumph. She carried a system of standards that operated through decisions and outcomes, something not used to existing through words. Kitchens without audiences taught her that food is simply right or wrong, and the cook bears responsibility for both. At times, she deflected that truth with dry humor. Alex once said that making a group of young men in a kitchen listen to an American woman was not something she would recommend anyone try, unless they had something strong enough to endure the pressure. The line sounds light, but it points to an uncomfortable truth. People rarely break from a single blow. They wear down from having to stay rigid every day. Meanwhile, the world around her began to change tempo. Food moved out of the closed space of the kitchen and into a different orbit. Faster, more visible, and less patient with silence. Alex had not yet appeared on television, but what she believed to be the core of the profession was already being pushed to the margins of that new space, where discipline was easily read as rigidity and restraint was easily mistaken for coldness. By the early 2000s, Alex Guarnaschelli was no longer someone merely executing other people's standards. She had stood in kitchens long enough to understand that maintaining standards, once it stops being a personal choice, becomes a systemic burden. What had been forged in silence now had to be applied before a collective, repeated every day, under conditions that allowed no hesitation. Before attaching her name to butter, Alex worked in major restaurants across the U.S., including time under Larry Forgione. In those spaces, she observed something different from Europe. Authority in the kitchen did not come only from technique, but from the ability to keep everything functioning when pressure closed in. Not every dish allowed debate. Not every decision came with time for explanation. Alex learned how to stand in the position where choices had to be made, and to accept that those choices would leave some people dissatisfied. In 2003, when Alex became executive chef at Butter in New York, she stepped into a role where silence was no longer a safe option. Butter was not an experimental kitchen. It was a restaurant with a steady rhythm, regular guests, and clear expectations. Dishes had to be right every night. Not almost right, not good enough. In this position, Alex did not lead with friendliness, nor did she create distance through deliberate rigidity. Her approach was simpler and more uncomfortable, keeping everything consistent. Once a standard was set, it did not change with mood or relationships. That created order. It also created a low, constant tension. Alex understood very clearly the difference between being in charge and being liked. Butter was where that difference could not be avoided. There were shifts that ended with the kitchen still quiet. Not because everyone was satisfied, but because there was nothing left to say. Alex did not try to fill those gaps. She was accustomed to letting results speak for themselves, even if that meant accepting being misunderstood as cold. Butter was not a place to wait for recognition. Every night, the kitchen ran on the same rhythm. Ingredients arrived on time, dishes went out to standard, and mistakes, if they happened, were addressed on the spot. There was no room for erratic inspiration, no time to cultivate a sense of satisfaction. Only the repetition of the same decisions, long enough to realize that keeping things right can itself become a form of erosion. Alex did not call her years at Butter a victory, nor did she recount them as a turning point of fame. There, authority did not come with a sense of safety. It carried responsibility, a certain solitude, and evenings that ended in silence. Not because things went badly, but because they were done correctly, and that was enough. No one applauds in a kitchen when a shift runs smoothly. While Butter maintained that steady rhythm, the outside world began to change. Chefs were increasingly seen as characters. Personal stories were being asked for, sometimes as much as the food itself. Alex remained in her familiar position, doing the work she had chosen. But the distance between what she was holding on to and how food was about to be narrated to the public grew clearer by the day. Alex Guarnaschelli had not yet appeared on camera, but the habits formed in that kitchen, deciding quickly, not softening language, letting standards exist without explanation, traveled with her. When another space later opened up, one where everything was seen, commented on, and edited, what Alex carried from Butter no longer stayed contained within the kitchen. It stepped into the light. For the first time, Alex Guarnaschelli had to voice her judgments outside the kitchen, without heat, without knives, without the familiar operational rhythm to lean on. The space was quieter, the gaze more concentrated, and her voice, once meant only to carry across a brigade, was suddenly placed at the center. Alex did not change how she spoke. She used the same pace, the same precision, the same sentence structure she used when facing a dish just off the stove. Her critiques were brief, direct, without detours, without emotional cushioning to soften the listener. In those few seconds, silence was no longer a professional rhythm. It became a reaction. Here, words were not heard only to be corrected. They were heard to be felt. And it was precisely there that what Alex carried from years in the kitchen became unmistakable. Those standards did not seek to please. That voice did not seek approval. It existed as a decision already made, with no need for consent. When television entered Alex Guarnaschelli's professional life, it did not arrive as a reward. It arrived as a new surface, flat, bright, and unforgiving. There were no exhaust fans to absorb her words, no kitchen rhythm to disperse attention. Every remark was now fully heard, recorded, edited, and replayed for people who had never stood in a kitchen, but still felt entitled to react. Alex did not go on air intending to become a character. Her early appearances carried the same habits she had built over years. Look directly at the dish, name the problem accurately, and stop. She did not construct crescendos in her speech. She did not add side stories to soften conclusions. Television, in those moments, did not turn her into someone else. It simply clarified what had already been there. When Alex hosted the Cooking Loft, the program resembled a classroom more than a stage. She stood before learners and did what she had always done in kitchens: identify structure, point out errors, and demand repetition. The difference was that this time, the audience was no longer a small group prepared for professional training, but a broad viewership with very different expectations. In later spaces like Iron Chef America and Chopped, that difference no longer stayed inside the kitchen. Television was now designed to generate drama, but her rhythm did not change. She did not raise her voice. She did not adjust her speaking speed to match the edit. Her critiques remained short, direct, focused on technique and professional decision-making. things often pushed aside when personal narratives are placed ahead of the food. It was here that Alex's voice began to unsettle people in a very specific way. Not because she was wrong, but because she did not do what television often expects: make viewers feel comfortable. When Alex spoke about undercooked elements, unbalanced textures, or a dish lacking thought from its starting point, she spoke as if the listener had a responsibility to understand. On television, that could easily be read as coldness. In a kitchen, it is simply necessary. Alex did not try to explain that style away. She did not justify herself through personal stories, nor did she adjust her language to fit the audience. Instead, she allowed the silence after her remarks to speak for itself. In many moments, that silence, left unfilled by music or narration, became the most tense point. Not because of interpersonal conflict, but because of a clash between two ways of understanding food, one that treats cooking as emotional content, and another that treats it as a profession requiring standards. She did not turn herself into a familiar role. She did not build a memorable persona. She did not choose lines meant to become viral quotes. The only constant was her refusal to abandon the system of standards she brought from the kitchen. Television for Alex was not a place to perform achievement. It was a place where standards were placed under harsh light and forced to endure interpretations they were never designed to withstand. After 2012, the first change did not take place in the kitchen, nor in Alex Guarnaschelli's way of judging. It took place in how her words were received. When the title Iron Chef stood behind every critique, the studio began to respond differently. Sentences that had once been heard as professional guidance now ended sooner. Not because they were complete, but because no one quite knew how to follow them. The space grew quieter. The silence after each judgment stretched a beat longer. There was no debate, no visible resistance, only the sense that a conclusion had just been placed down and that everything after it had become unnecessary. The words themselves had not changed, but their weight had. Once authority entered the room, each critique began to take the shape of a period. Television, accustomed to operating on emotional rhythm and quick recovery, was forced to adjust to this kind of finality. The gaps after judgments needed to be filled with background music. Shots had to be cut earlier, not because the content lacked drama, but because the drama had already been compressed into the decisiveness of the words themselves. From that point on, Alex Guarnaschelli's presence on television settled into a pattern of high-intensity repetition. Dense shooting schedules, steady airtime, expectations that did not diminish with time. Each appearance was no longer a new test, but another moment of standing before a gaze that was already familiar, already conditioned in how it read her. The pressure did not come from harsh backlash, but from the demand to maintain the same standard across increasingly varied contexts. Television accelerated, content shortened, emotion was prioritized because it was easier to share, while Alex's professional rhythm did not change. That very constancy, placed within an environment that continuously demanded adaptation, began to drain energy in a quiet, cumulative way. During these years, Alex appeared less often in spaces that required her to play a role, not as withdrawal, but as selection. That selection was never articulated as strategy, it showed up in her schedule instead. Programs that allowed her to speak fully, stop at the right moment, and did not require emotional interpretation in place of the food were favored. Spaces that depended on prolonged debate or needed soft imagery to balance the format gradually became less suitable. At the same time, pressure in her professional life did not ease. The restaurant remained a place where standards had to be upheld every day without seasonal breaks. Unlike a studio where mistakes could be edited out, a kitchen offered no such option. This dual intensity, public presence alongside real operational responsibility, made the limits of endurance more visible. Not the limits of skill, but the limits of continuous presence. Around 2017-2018, self-imposed boundaries began to take clearer form in how Alex organized her professional life. Not by stepping away from the spotlight, but by narrowing its scope. Fewer shows, fewer overlapping roles, no expansion of her public image into formats detached from the craft. Television was repositioned, not as the center of her life, but as a surface of contact. Notably, this restraint did not come with a softer tone. Alex did not become gentler to compensate for appearing less. If anything, each time she spoke, her words became shorter and more decisive, as though there was no surplus energy left for unnecessary explanation. For some viewers, this created a sense of distance. For others, it read as a sign of someone deliberately setting boundaries in order to continue working for the long term. By 2019-2020, that state entered a different context, as the operational rhythm of the entire industry was disrupted. Restaurants faced unprecedented pressure. Television could no longer rely on its old momentum. In that rupture, Alex's presence carried no symbolic weight, no manifesto. She did not represent collective hope or emotion. She appeared just enough to do what needed to be done, say what needed to be said, and stop. Setting boundaries here did not mean stepping away from responsibility, but clearly defining where presence was necessary and where it was not. As intensity ceased to be the sole measure of professional value, Alex maintained a more durable rhythm of existence. Quieter, less scattered, less pulled into expectations that did not belong to the kitchen. By the end of the decade, what emerged was not a contraction of her career, but a different shape of it. Not disappearing from television, but not allowing television to define her entire professional life either. A narrower path, where each appearance had to justify the energy it consumed. In a professional world governed by standards and decisive judgment, Carl Ruiz appeared as a rare exception, not because he opposed Alex Guarnaschelli, but because he allowed a different rhythm to coexist. Around Carl, pauses did not need to be filled. Sentences did not have to end in conclusions. And joy was not treated as dilution of the craft. This was not indulgence, but a slight loosening, something rarely permitted in Alex's professional life. When Carl passed away at 44, everything happened too fast. Only afterward did it become known that the cause was cardiovascular disease related to arterial blockage. Alex did not turn that loss into a speech. She did not recount the shock, nor did she construct a narrative of overcoming grief. She wrote about Carl as a combination difficult to name: protective, insightful, reckless, exceptional, carrying a kind of mischievous humor that felt nearly irreplaceable, and ended with a sentence so direct it required no further explanation. Her life would be lonelier without him. After that, Alex did not change how she appeared. She did not retreat. She did not speak more. But a small shift became noticeable. Her tolerance for elements that did not go straight to the food began to narrow. Details that once were allowed to pass were stopped earlier, not with harshness, but by ending them. As though, when the one person who permitted her professional rhythm to tilt slightly was no longer there, Alex saw no reason to maintain that tilt before the public eye. 2 years later, another anchor left that structure. Maria Guarnaschelli passed away. For Alex, what departed was not memory, but a mechanism that had once kept everything in place. Maria did not teach her to love the craft. She taught her how to take responsibility for every detail, how not to allow mistakes to linger, and how to live within a rhythm where emotion had no right to slow the process. After this point, Alex's voice did not change, but its focus did. She spoke more often about standards, not as ideals, but as conditions of existence. Conversely, the words that once allowed the profession to be framed through emotion gradually disappeared from her public language. There was no declaration, no rupture. They simply ceased to be used. What stands out is that Alex never said these departures had affected her. Yet after 2021, the buffers that once softened her professional rhythm were no longer present. Her judgments ended sooner. Fewer explanatory loops, less waiting for response. As if, when those who once absorbed the surplus of emotion were gone, Alex chose to stop generating that surplus altogether. There is no pain recast as narrative. Only a sustained compression, forcing every decision to move straighter, leaner, without room to retreat. Standards, once tools for doing good work, became the structure that kept everything from collapsing. And when standards assume that function, there is no longer space for the language of softness. After those losses, Alex Guarnaschelli did not seek out another space to unload what remained. She kept the rhythm she had always known, starting work on time, ending on time, and not letting anything spill into the next day. But when external anchors were gone, the load-bearing force began to concentrate in a single place. Not the kitchen, not the studio, but a private life with no fixed hours. Her private life did not open up as a respite. It stretched on like a shift with no clear assignment board and no definitive end. Unspoken choices began to surface in her schedule, shortened trips, evenings that did not run late, empty spaces deliberately kept rather than filled. No one called it sacrifice, but it repeated often enough to become structure. Alex did not bring professional standards home in an imposing way, but the rhythm was held so tightly that there was no room for release. When a day could not be corrected once it had passed, she chose not to let it drift aimlessly. No explanations, no verbal compensation, just holding presence at points that could not be moved, as if loosening a single link would cause everything else to collapse. From there, Alex's marriage and family did not emerge as a parallel story, but as another face of the same structure, one where the principles that had once kept her standing in her profession began to be tested in ways no longer measurable by outcomes. Before that relationship was named by marriage, Brandon Clark entered Alex's life through a very ordinary point of the craft. At the time, Alex was teaching a fish cooking class at the Institute of Culinary Education in New York. Brandon was a lawyer looking for a different direction in his life, and he did not arrive as a spectator. He asked questions like someone wanting to step into that space, not observe it from the outside. Brandon persuaded Alex to let him work part-time at Butter, where she was serving as executive chef. Within that enclosed work environment, their connection formed gradually, without declarations, without gestures formally labeled as beginnings. In 2007, Alex married Brandon Clark. In its early phase, the relationship carried the shape of a rare balance. Brandon did not belong to the kitchen world, nor did he move within television's orbit. He came from a different rhythm, less governed by rigid standards, with more room for flexibility. At that time, the difference did not create friction. It created the sense that Alex could exist outside the role of standard bearer, at least in a private space where things did not need to be decided by conclusions. They had a daughter together, Ava, and almost immediately, Alex entered a state with no familiar frame of reference to cling to. It was not professional pressure nor public expectation, but a raw fear without standards, the fear of getting things wrong where there was no chance to fix them. She listened to the baby monitor so closely she was afraid to move away from the sound, then placed herself on the floor beside the crib as if staying in that exact position could prevent the worst from happening. The thought that her child might stop breathing in the middle of the night clung to her through prolonged sleep deprivation, long enough to make everything feel fragile. In desperation, Alex called her father. Years later, when recalling that moment, she said that merely thinking about it was enough to make her cry. Her father reassured her that the baby would be fine, but that she would not, and told her to go back to her room and sleep. A very simple push, but enough to pull her back into a rhythm she could continue. From then on, Alex's life began to form non-negotiable points. Work schedules had to end on time. Trips had to be shorter. Evenings were no longer allowed to stretch simply because kitchens were used to stretching. Becoming a mother did not soften Alex in the way people often expect. It made her more afraid of mistakes, more afraid of absence, more afraid of losing moments that could never be recovered. And at the same time, it made her harsher with herself at work, as if slowing down even a step would cause both worlds to collapse at once. That marriage did not break because of betrayal, nor because of a single event large enough to force everything to fall apart. It wore down in silence, the kind of silence very familiar in relationships where both people do their part correctly, yet can no longer reach each other's inner worlds. For Alex, the kitchen had always consumed nearly all of her living energy. For Brandon, that absence was not a fault that could be named, but a distance that stretched on, becoming harder to bridge each day. In 2015, they divorced. When the news surfaced, the media immediately searched for a reason clear enough to label, and speculation about infidelity spread along familiar lines. Alex did not step into that explanatory space. She neither confirmed nor denied in self-defense. Her silence was not ambiguous. It was a clearly drawn boundary. Private life was not to become fuel for professional rhythm. There was no press conference, no accusations, no blame-driven narrative told to complete a dramatic arc. Alex effectively refused to turn the collapse of her marriage into emotional material for public consumption, and that choice in itself spoke louder than any explanation could. This was a cut deep enough not to be touched, not shallow enough to be recounted lightly. After the divorce, Alex entered the most visible period of her television career. But behind the lights, she was a single mother, navigating a dense filming schedule alongside the responsibility of raising her daughter. There were no images of new love put on display. No narrative of rising again after collapse, framed as a victory. Only a very clear choice. Alex's family had become smaller, but absolutely protected. Years after her first marriage, Alex allowed another private structure to enter her life. Quietly, unnamed in public. That relationship ended before becoming a marriage, even though there was a moment when everything seemed ready to go further. Alex became engaged to chef Michael Castellon after an encounter as ordinary as the craft itself. A meal, a compliment on a steak, an invitation into the kitchen, attraction forming without design. She once said she wanted a big wedding. Then everything stopped. The engagement was called off. Michael left only a brief message of goodwill. Alex did not hide the fact that she struggled. She joked that pizza was getting her through. Later, she wrote a line that was both light and cold. Part of life is being alone. Part of it is being lost. And sometimes it is the spaces in between where life truly happens. She closed with a choice that required no justification. Her life, she said, was a pursuit of flavor. From that point on, Alex Guarnaschelli's life was measured by work schedules and deliberately kept gaps. There were no declarations of change, only shorter trips, days that were not extended further, and invitations declined because they demanded too much presence elsewhere. Alex does not talk about balance. But the way her days are arranged reveals a kind of priority that does not need naming. Her presence is not defined by always being there, but by not disappearing from places that cannot be moved. In that structure, there is no way to fix a day once it has passed, and Alex does not attempt to compensate with explanations. She keeps a steady rhythm, quietly, the same way she treats every standard she refuses to let collapse. This phase of her life is not shaped by rumor or rupture. It exists in a prolonged state, standing firmly in public while carrying a private life that is not shared. Alex does not turn these realities into stories meant to inspire, nor does she use them to explain her severity. Remaining silent, continuing to work, continuing to raise her child becomes a form of long-term existence, without catharsis, without closure. Family does not soften Alex, but it makes the cost of endurance more visible than ever, not as a wound that needs to be narrated, but as a sustained undertone beneath every later decision. Something never set down, yet never stared at for too long. When all the weight of endurance is compressed into the rhythm of work, what remains can only surface when the profession itself is pushed into a test that allows no avoidance. Alex Guarnaschelli's standing at Food Network never needed to be proven by the number of shows she appeared on. But by 2022, another surface of the real kitchen became unmistakably visible. Alex vs. America premiered as an unspoken confrontation, not about who cooked better, but about who could hold standards under the highest pressure. On air, the mandoline sliced into her hand. Blood appeared, not as a climax, but as a detail out of place in a television environment. There was no background music, no pause for emotion to speak. After first aid, Alex returned to the kitchen. The competition continued. The shift resumed as if it had only been interrupted for a brief beat. No explanation was offered, apparently because none was required. In early 2024, another absence unfolded in the same way Alex often lets things pass. Quietly. She no longer appeared on the kitchen. There was no official announcement, no farewell, only one detail sufficient to confirm it. Her name disappeared from the program's page, and her work schedule adjusted into a different shape. Alex did not debate the reason. She did not raise public questions. Instead, she maintained her rhythm, posting an ordinary photo, speaking about small things, as if the backstage shifts did not deserve additional energy. This was not performative calm, but a clearly drawn boundary, where work continues and peripheral matters are not pulled into the center. Her presence at Food Network did not end after 2024. It simply changed form. Other projects continued to operate, as if what mattered had never been a fixed position, but the ability to keep working without explaining every departure. At present, Alex Guarnaschelli is not living in a state of recovery, nor is she searching for a new version of herself. Her life runs on a narrowed rhythm. Fewer overlapping roles, fewer unnecessary appearances, and a very clear awareness of where she needs to be and where she does not. Television remains present, but no longer serves as the central measure of professional value. The restaurant continues to operate, but is not elevated into a symbol of endurance. Everything exists in its proper place, without the need for further narration. Alex does not frame her current life as a story of balance, nor does she speak of choosing herself or slowing down in the familiar language of the moment. The adjustment shows itself in schedules, in reduced appearances, in refusing to stretch days that are already long enough. There is no declaration of change, only what is no longer done and what is kept durable enough to continue. Its shape remains what it was from the beginning: direct, ending early, uninterested in inviting emotional debate. The difference lies in frequency. Fewer words, but not lighter ones. Less presence, but not diminished. Younger professionals seek her out to learn how to hold standards in a world increasingly impatient with them. and few deny that those standards, held long enough, create a rare kind of stability in a space accustomed to operating on emotion and rapid reaction. She does not leave behind a school, nor does she create an easily replicated model. What remains is a professional habit, naming the problem accurately, ending at the right moment, and refusing to soften conclusions in exchange for comfort. And it is precisely this habit that keeps the profession from sliding entirely away from its original structure. Alex does not stand as an inspirational figure. She occupies a harder position, continuing to work while refusing to let the profession use her private life as proof of itself. Her imprint, therefore, does not lie in repeated images, but in a standard set down long enough that others are forced to measure themselves against it, even when they choose to turn in another direction.